Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana. If you're new here, if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Tuesday, May the 25th. We're inching closer to that Memorial Day weekend that I know we are all waiting on. But before we get there, we had some interesting coronavirus vaccine news, and I thought today would be a perfect time to recap that. So today I am joined by our data reporter, Ramsey Archibald. Ramsey is here to talk about some of the data he uncovered when looking at national vaccination rates and also county by county vaccination rates in Alabama. So Ramsey, I know that you had a story this morning. We're going to link that in our comments in a little bit. And it showed that Alabama and Mississippi are far behind the national average of vaccination rates. So where are Mississippi and Alabama standing exactly?
Well, last and second from last. Mississippi, so there's actually a number of ways you can look at vaccination rates. So the most common of which these days is just percent of population fully vaccinated. You can do it by adults or people getting one shot, because as we know, most of the vaccines given require 2 doses to be fully vaccinated. But pretty much no matter how you look at it, Mississippi and Alabama are last and dead last, or second to last. And the South in general, so Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Louisiana, are also underperforming in vaccinations.
So according to your reporting, we know that Alabama is at a vaccination rate of total population vaccinated, 28.7%, followed only by Mississippi with a 26.5% rate. So that is the rate of total population vaccinated as you report. So let me ask you several questions. One, does that include children? When I say children, I mean teenagers. We know that the Pfizer vaccine is approved for people as young as 12. Moderna just, I believe this morning or yesterday, recommending that their vaccine also get its approval. Still waiting on that. But does this total population count, does it include those people under the ages of 18?
Yes, it does. And there are, like I was saying before, you can control for those populations. You could look at adults only, or you could look at 12 and up. But because of the way that the CDC tracks and ADPH tracks, it's easier to just look at total population. But even when you do control for adults, Alabama and Mississippi are still trailing.
That's interesting. So we know, again, Alabama, 28.7% of its total population vaccinated. Is that a number of population who has received both of their vaccines or just one dose?
Yeah, so that 28.7% number, and that is as of May 23rd CDC data. So that's 2 days ago now. So it may be a little bit different as of today, but that number is people who have completed their series. So they've either gotten 2 shots of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines or the one Johnson & Johnson.
Got it. So completed their vaccination series. Important to note. Now, we're going to pull up that county map in a minute so people can kind of get a look at where their county stands in vaccination rates. So stay tuned for that. But first, Ramsey, I have a question, and that is about the different types of vaccines being given. Do you have any data on how many people in Alabama have gotten which brand versus another?
You can find that information on the ADPH dashboard, I believe, and the vast majority are either Pfizer or Moderna. I don't have that right in front of me right now, but like the percent that's Johnson & Johnson is pretty minuscule in the grand scheme of things.
Something that we heard very early on when these shots started becoming more readily available to Alabamians was that Alabama was lagging nationally in these rates, but it was because we got a slow start. That was something that we heard a lot of officials, we heard a lot of people kind of making a reason for why Alabama was so far behind nationally. We know that was true. We were behind nationally. We did get a little bit slower of a start. So do we know if our numbers are lagging behind because of that slow start, or is it just because we really have never been able to ramp up those vaccination rates at a point where other states are doing?
That's a great question. I don't personally. I think the slow start narrative is a little bit overplayed. I think there's obviously people can now go get vaccinated very easily in Alabama if you want to, if you haven't been yet, and people aren't doing it. So I think there's a hesitance to get the vaccine here, which is the main contributing factor. And I don't know what plays into that. But that I don't think it's because of a slow start. I think we just haven't embraced the idea of going to get it. And that's true across the South as well. And although I will say one thing, one way of looking at the data that shows Alabama is actually not second from last, but third, is in those who have gotten the first dose. So we're third from last. That's still not great, but that does sort of indicate that maybe more people are starting their vaccine series here as opposed to, having already done it. So maybe that is a little bit of catch up. But if you look at controlling for population, if you just compare Alabama's vaccinations per day, per person, basically, we were about equal with the national average as recently as March. And since then, the gap has grown. So the idea that we were slower back then doesn't really bear out, but we're definitely slower now.
That's interesting. I've got somebody, Pam, saying maybe it is because people don't trust the vaccine. And Pam, I think you're definitely right. I mean, as Ramsey mentioned, we know that the vaccine hesitancy has to be the reason because in Alabama, over the country, but especially in Alabama, we've got plenty of supply. The demand has decreased. We know one of the providers of some of these sites in the central Alabama region, that is University of Alabama at Birmingham, they have even started to shut down some of those mass vaccination sites because they are just not seeing the demand that was kind of seen in the beginning, that late February, early March period. So Ramsey, let's transition a little bit and let's talk about our counties in Alabama. So we have this map that you made for us, you made for your story, and there is several different ways you can look at it. But the easiest way to look at it is if you're going to just look and get a broad scope, you can look at the county's color. So tell us what the colors mean, if it's darker or lighter per county.
Right. So the darker the color, the higher percent of total population. So like we talked about before, sorry if you can hear my dogs barking. It's the percent of the total population. So that includes children, people of all ages, who has completed a vaccination series. So again, 2 shots of Moderna or Pfizer, 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson.
So if you want to know about your county, shout it out and we will look at it. I'm going to go ahead and look at my county, and that is Jefferson. So as we pull over this map, you can see that when you pull your cursor over it, you can get that information. We'll link all that here again so you can look at it on your own time if you would like. But this is Jefferson County. And when you look at the different data here, you can see several numbers. But one number that I want to look at is the percent fully vaccinated. And that percentage number in Jefferson County is 30.9. So slightly higher than that state average. We know that just several days ago was 28.7. But Ramsey, when you were gathering this data for this county map, what did you see in terms of maybe who was the most vaccinated county and who was the least?
Sure. So if you're looking at the percent that's completed that vaccination series, you're going to see a lot of counties in the Black Belt are the highest percentage. And part of that is to do with the fact that they're very small counties. They have, populations of 10,000, even less than that sometimes. And it gets larger. But so Hale County, which is there in the Black Belt, it's the darkest green on that map. It's the highest percentage complete for vaccinations. It's 32.6%. And it's 38.1% of the population there has had at least 1 dose, which is not the highest. I think there's a couple that are higher than that, including Perry County at 39.7% of 1 dose. And so a lot of these smaller counties have high percentages, but they're not the only ones. As you can see, Madison County, which is where Huntsville is, that's in North Alabama, has 31.6%. That's the same as a couple other counties, but Madison's a large county. It's one of the largest in the state. So for them to have that high percentage as well is pretty impressive. That means a much larger raw number of people have completed their vaccine series. That's true in Jefferson County too, and Shelby as well, which is just to the south. It's sort of the suburb county to Birmingham. But both of those are over 30%. And there's only 8 counties in Alabama that are above 30% fully vaccinated, which that's good for those counties, but it's still very low when you look at a national comparison. I think they expected today that 50% of all Americans would cross the fully vaccinated threshold. So we're still, like I said, lagging very far behind.
Well, and then something too that I think is interesting, kind of in contrast, is to look at some of these very unvaccinated counties, right? Some of these very light colored counties. So I'm going to move down this way to Escambia County, and it's hard to judge based on the color gradation here, but that's one of the lightest colors I can see on this map, and that is showing a percent fully vaccinated of 18%. Ramsey, that seems pretty low. Is that low because of the lower population there, or is that low just because it's low because people are hesitant in Escambia County?
Your guess is as good as mine. You would think so. Escambia County is home to about 37,000 people, which is small, but it's not the smallest county in Alabama by any stretch. It's not even close. There's a handful. Russell County, which is on the border with Georgia, it's kind of near Auburn in East Alabama. It's home to almost 60,000 people, and it's the lowest in the state at just 13.9% vaccinated, fully vaccinated. That's really, really low. I don't know what's going on in those counties. Maybe, I mean, it's possible that there's a problem with the data. Maybe people in Russell County, for instance, and a couple of these that we looked at are border states. Maybe they're crossing the border into Georgia to get vaccinated, and somehow that data doesn't get transposed over. It's supposed to be, because this data should be by county of residence. So if you live in Russell County, you should be counted in Russell County if you get vaccinated. I don't know if it works 100% perfectly in the data reporting, though. And it could be that, like you said, that there's more hesitance in those counties, but I don't know for sure.
Interesting. You said that. I was sitting here trying to click on the map and trying to click on Russell County, and on, my screen, it is so light green. It looks white. I couldn't find Russell County, and I'm like, I know it's here. I know it's under Lee County, but I cannot find it. So I'm glad you brought that one up, because I just thought it was, a missing county here that you had put. But it's interesting because this region around Russell County, primarily at Chambers and Lee County, that was where we saw a really big, it wasn't even necessarily big per population, but one of our first outbreaks of coronavirus in Alabama in 2020. So those counties are a lot more green, aka a lot more vaccinated than that neighboring Russell County just to the south. So it's interesting to me, the small county boundary lines, how big of a difference that can make in terms of vaccinations. You see, again, I'll hover above, I believe this is Lee County here. Lee County has got a percent fully vaccinated of 29.4. Then you go just a couple miles south in some instances to Russell County with just a 13.9% vaccination rate. That's very interesting to me.
Yes. And Russell County has been the slowest county to vaccinate according to the data since the beginning. It's always been well behind the rest of the state. And part of me thinks that that number is too low. I find it hard to believe, like you said, like these county lines are in some ways arbitrary. You wouldn't think that just because they're one county over, they're that much less likely to go get vaccinated. I think there's a chance that, and that's so Russell County is part of the Columbus, Georgia metro area. So there's a lot of, more so than a lot of other border counties, that county has a lot of overflow with Georgia. So maybe that has something to do with it, but I don't want to speculate too much. I don't know the answer, but that number is obviously very low.
That's really interesting. There, I'm looking through some of these comments. A lot of people who are not interested in getting their vaccine, which we know is their right to do here. But we do know recently Alabama did pass a law banning vaccine passports, which means that businesses cannot require people to show proof of vaccination before entering, before being provided service, et cetera. So just interesting things happening around nationally and in Alabama with vaccines. So Ramsey, thank you so much for providing this information. Thank you for putting it in a form where we can all understand it. We don't have to be data whizzes to understand colors on a map, and we appreciate that. We're going to link all of that here in the comment thread. And Ramsey, we just appreciate you again gathering this knowledge for us, for those of us who maybe, like myself, are not great at knowing where to go and get that information and put it in a really easy to understand manner.
Thank you.
And everybody watching, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We will see you tomorrow.